Thank you, Shamali. Our next lecture is by Priya Kale of the USA, and she's going to be speaking on Chiron 2027, an evolutionary threshold.
Just give them a moment, but thank you to the committee for organizing such a special event, and thank you for being here, and I'm very honored to be speaking to you today. And before I begin, I just want to take a moment to say a prayer. Om Gam Ganpate Namah, Om Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Okay, so today I want to talk to you about Chiron, which is a centaur planet. And yes, I'm a Western astrologer, but what I will share with you today, I'm fairly confident that it will, if you explore it even in terms of Vedic astrology, it should still hold true. So when we study astrology, well, really, since the dawn of time, humans have sought wisdom from the stars and planets because we seek order amongst chaos. The planets are the only unknown reality that we can predict. The world is absolutely unpredictable. We know where Saturn will be 10 days from now, 15 years from now. What that means is subject to interpretation, which is the field of our study. And of course, clients seek astrology for various reasons. But whatever they're seeking or whatever they're looking for, ultimately, every desire is implicit with the understanding or expectation that when that desire is fulfilled, it will bring happiness. And this happiness, the search for happiness, we misguidedly often seek it in the external world rather than the internal world. And that's like watering the branches of the tree and expecting it to grow. So even when we do astrology, yes, we can look at what's going on in a certain part of the chart or with a certain planet, but until we're able to integrate the whole thing as a whole and read the chart as a whole, we'll never really understand what we're trying to say. Oh. Sorry, give me 1 second. How does this work? Okay. So astrology ultimately is a tool. No matter what kind of astrology you practice, Western or Vedic, it's a tool. And what's important is the message that's coming through. And we use it to divine a universal truth and universal message. What I'm sharing with you today is, this is my own experience, born out of 12 years of reading charts, and I've used this one very simple technique. And I use it as, before a session, of course, I'll look at the chart, I'll look at the planets, I'll try to integrate it in my understanding. But when I begin a session, before I even start to tell them anything, I will use this technique. And I'll ask them what happened at certain points in their life. Because what I'm really mapping is just very simple transits, which I'll get into later. And it will give me a sense of this person's journey, what brought them from birth to this current point in time. And that really helps to integrate the whole chart, and then we proceed with whatever the reading, whatever reason they came there for. And if astrology, again, is a tool which we can use to any end, if the ultimate goal of any life is self-realization, then it's one of the finest tools we have. And Chiron in a chart, or rather Chiron's transits in a chart, will speak to this very process of divine consciousness awakening or Kundalini awakening. And it is a healing journey. And if you take nothing else away from this talk today, if you take nothing else away from this talk today, I would say that, especially as astrologers, the message is meditation. As we move and inculcating a daily practice of meditation, only then can we be clear channels for a divine stream of consciousness. Another thing, before I get into Chiron itself, these are just a few of the Chiron is a centaur planet, classified as a centaur planet, and it was discovered in 1977. As we approach 2027, Chiron will complete one orbit, one 50-year orbit in the sky. And it's the first orbital return since discovery. And if we look at just a few of the events, and I'm not a mundane astrologer, but this is pretty astonishing. If we look at just a few of the events that occurred within a month of Chiron's discovery, it's pretty revealing. All of these things speak to the state of the world today, and the world is in a state of crisis today. So Chiron was discovered on the 1st of November. On October 26th, 1977, we had the last natural case of smallpox was discovered. And the World Health Organization considers this the anniversary of the eradication of smallpox, which was a big step for modern science. On November 19th, we had the first Arab leader to make an official visit to Israel, seeking a permanent peace settlement. On November 22nd, British Airways inaugurated the first Concorde service. So we see advances in the fields of physics and technology as well. Also on November 22nd, the first TCP/IP test succeeded, which is now today the internet. On November 28th, Green Dolphin Street was the first digitally recorded album to be released, music album. And then on November 30th, the International Fund for Agricultural Development was founded as an agency of the UN. And given the state of the world today and what's happening with the GMOs and the food we eat and the way crops are farmed, it's very relevant. So, yes, as we approach 2027, as a planet, this is a ripening of the seeds that were planted in 1977. And this is a rebirth of collective consciousness. It can be easy in the face of everything that's going on in the world to feel really small and insignificant, but the microcosm is the macrocosm, and it begins with individuals. So this is a little introduction to Chiron, and then we'll get into the technique. So Chiron was a centaur. This is the mythology of Chiron. And a centaur, they were half man, half horse. So even in that, we get the image of a higher consciousness rising out of our primal nature. And its themes, Chiron was also a great teacher, a teacher of astrology even, and he was a healer. And he was immortal. But he was also wounded in his foot by a poisoned arrow. So he had to live in eternity in awareness of this pain, but that also made him a better healer because he was able to empathize with others and understand their pain. So its themes speak, Chiron will speak of healing, and then at the end of it, Chiron's death is interesting, where he finally gave up his life to save Prometheus, which I won't get into too much right now, but there is the theme of regeneration and liberation that comes up with Chiron. Chiron's symbol is the key, and in observing transits, you will find, as I have, it has the ability to unlock a chart. It just kind of opens up the chart and helps you see it as a whole, as opposed to separate planets. It helps you integrate it. Tracking the transits will also reveal seed potential. So when a client comes to me for the first time, especially, if I just ask them, what was going on in this year and this year and this year, they will tell me a story. And of course, we will see the themes play out depending on which house Chiron was placed in at the time or was transiting at the time. You'll see that, you'll hear that in their story, but there are very distinct themes that point to this individual person's purpose. And it is a key, so it opens gates of consciousness. And you'll hear this from clients over and over again. We also see this in its very unique orbit. It has a very unique orbit. It crosses the orbits of Saturn and Uranus. Saturn being our limitations, our mortality, and Uranus being the awakener. And if Saturn is the gatekeeper or the gateway, Chiron, as it crosses those orbits, there is a sense, similarly, as it moves around the chart, it opens gates of consciousness to new levels of consciousness within. And sometimes that happens in terms of creating chaos outside, so you find it within, peace within, but we'll get to that later. It also, from time to timelessness. Another very interesting thing is, for those of you who aren't familiar, there's something called the Sabian symbols, which is, they're symbols for every degree of the zodiac, which were defined by L.C. Wheeler. But the discovery degree for Chiron's discovery degree was at 3 plus Taurus, and I'm speaking tropical astrology, but this Sabian symbol for that discovery degree is the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. This is also very suggestive of the 7 chakras, the rainbow being the 7 colors, the 7 planets, the 7 chakras, which after alignment, it reaches the pot of gold, which is the Sahasrara chakra. So a natal chart, I mean, what are we? We're seeds of consciousness planted on this material plane. And as depending on where we were born, how we were nurtured, society, parents, we're conditioned and we grow. And depending on the kind of nurturing we receive, some plants, some trees will grow to bear fruit, lush fruit, give back to the world. Others might wither and die. Some plants might grow in spite of the odds, despite the odds. The thing is that this life is happening through us. Even the Kundalini awakening is a very natural process. There's not much, we don't even control our heartbeats. There's not much we can do about this, other than how we experience life, really. So, I'm jumping a little bit, but. So Chiron in a natal chart can often point to when we're born, when the umbilical cord is cut, there is that pain of separation, which is very deep and subconscious and embedded. But it can often point to that birth wound, Chiron in a natal chart, where there's a sense of wounding because we sense separation from the mother. But the reality is the universe is oneness, and we're never really separated from the universe. Or the divine mother, she's within us as much as we're within the universe. So Chiron in a chart will point to that place where we're most connected to source, but we're also most vulnerable to experiencing life and most sensitive to life, to experiencing empathy, other people's joy and pain. Now, when we're looking at Chiron in a chart, I hesitate to delineate Chiron directly. Of course, you can look at the sign it's placed in, you can look at the house it's placed in, and it will give you a picture. But still, the transits really are the key because they will tell you a story. And it's more important for us as astrologers to really understand what's going on before we start to tell a client something. So the transits, when I say transits, what I'm looking at really, I'm going to get into, okay. The first square, what I'm looking at when I look at Chiron, and another thing that I forgot to mention earlier, because Chiron has such an elliptical orbit, it crosses the orbits of Saturn and Uranus, it doesn't pass through the signs regularly. It'll pass through some signs faster than others. So everybody will experience these transits at different ages. The first 90-degree square, so you're going to have to look at an ephemeris to see it for every individual chart. The return happens for 50, which is common for everyone, but the individual points will happen at different ages. The first square, for example, can happen anywhere between the age of 6 years old to 22 years old. And again, depending on when a person experiences the first square, that will also, tell you something about the way they experience the transit and life. People who have it early in life, often, things are happening to them. They're too little to affect their world. So, but they're also the people we consider to be old souls in a way, because they grow up much faster. So the first square is when Chiron is making a 90-degree angle to the natal position. So let's say you had Chiron at 2 degrees Taurus. When Chiron, or your client has Chiron at 2 degrees Taurus. When Chiron is at, you want to ask them, you want to look at what was going on when Chiron reached 2 degrees of Leo. And ask them what was going on at that time. And, you know, if they say, oh, I don't remember, a good way to do is, you know, where were you living? Or you can see what house it's going on in. If it's in the 11th house, you can say, okay, what was going on with your friends? You'll hear a story. At some point, they'll say, oh, that. The second square, then you map the second square. Of course, this is depending on the age of your client. The second, not second square, I made a mistake. The opposition. You have the first opening square, then the next one is the opposition. And then the third square, which is the closing 90-degree square. And then at 50 years, we have the return. So at the age of 50, there is a sense of rebirth. There is a rebirth of consciousness that takes place. And at this point, if a person has done the work of healing with awareness, then there can be a blossoming of one's gifts, a realization of one's life purpose. So what I've also, this is again my theory, but this is also my experience in what I've seen. We have the chakras. So the first square, when that happens, it opens the granthis are the energetic knots. And there's 3 main granthis. There's the Brahma Granthi, Vishnu Granthi, and the Rudra Granthi. There are 2 chakras each, starting from the bottom. And and I'm not a Vedic astrologer, nor am I a Vedic scholar, but when that first Chiron square happens, there is an opening of the Brahma Granthi, where even if for a moment there is a realization for that person where I am not the creator, that's what happens when that energetic knot opens. And that's why Chiron is the key. It'll open those knots, or it'll show you points when those knots are opening, and which is why meditation becomes really important. And if you've been doing it consistently, then these peak points will feel like a sense of liberation, or feel like they're stepping into a new future. The second, when the opposition happens, it opens the Vishnu Granthi, which says, I am not the sustainer, and there's a realization of that. Then the third one is the Rudra Granthi, which opens up the realization that I am not the destroyer. And then finally, at the age of 50, there is that rebirth of consciousness. So some of the themes when Chiron makes these transits in the chart, how they manifest are very unique to every client. And that's why it's so important to just listen to what people are saying. But the level of chaos that manifests at the time of these, or crisis or chaos that manifests at the time of these transits, is directly related to the person's level of awareness. So if the person is not very centered, or their energy is not very grounded, if there's no awareness, it will manifest in themes of addiction, drugs, denial, deceit, delusion, depression, illness, trauma, isolation, anything to get the person centered again. There is always a before and after feeling, so it doesn't last forever, but it will happen so that it forces the individual to go within. It forces the individual to realize that they are not in control of the greater world and they are part of a greater force. With alignment, once the person is able to make the necessary changes, or let's say the person is already on their path and living their purpose, then there's a sense of liberation stepping through a gateway, a flowering and blossoming of one's being. And it brings an awareness of self, of realization of, okay, why am I here? Why am I even on this planet? Why am I alive? I'll give you one example. One of my clients, she had Chiron in her 3rd house. I don't remember what sign it was, but she grew up in a family where she was one of many children, and she was kind of the middle child, and she didn't feel like her voice was heard. There was always a lot of chaos, arguments. She didn't feel like she had a voice in the family. But then at the age of 50, that's about, I mean, she came to me post 50, I don't remember exactly what age. But at about the age of 50, she started working as a mediator for families in crisis. So she was able to use what had felt to her like a wound, where, okay, I can't use my voice, no one listens to me. She had learned how to use that as a gift and then help other families in crisis by the time she turned 50. So yes, when you look at transits in the natal chart, you're going to see a running theme in a person's life going backwards. It really is like taking someone's medical history. You can't prescribe them something until you know what's been going on and where the source of this wound is. So yes, these transits will often bring that sense of stepping out of time. Chronos, which is time, Saturn, to enter Kairos, and timelessness, Uranus, which goes beyond time. Even if for a brief instant, revealing or offering a glimpse into the true nature of self. But this is a meditative state that we can achieve through conscious meditation and daily practices, spiritual practices. We don't have to wait for a Chiron transit or for a crisis to happen to, find that center. Then the transits can be experienced more as a healing and flowering of your life. So this is just a summary, but yes, people come to us in times of crisis, and I'm not saying you have to use this with every client, but I would definitely urge you to at least try this on your own chart. And if you find it valuable, absolutely use it with clients. I've found it absolutely invaluable. And as we approach 2027, we're going to see that, the world is in crisis. But at the same time, there are a lot of people who are awakening to their spirituality and their spiritual gifts. And we're going to see that more with our clients. So it's important that at least we be aware. And we as astrologers are in a unique position to share the wisdom of the planets and the stars. But an astrology never fails, but an astrologer can be wrong, no matter how proficient or prescient we are. And we have a lot of power when it comes to our clients. Something I say for a moment, I may forget, but the client will remember that forever, So with that power comes responsibility, and humility is needed to know that we don't know it all, and we can never know it all. What transpires between a client and an astrologer is really beyond even the astrologer's ability to understand. Even we don't know what is really happening there. And, to make a prediction just for the sake of it can sometimes be more damaging. So if our astrological studies are the foundation of our practice, meditation needs to be, it gives us clarity. It provides us an anchor. Otherwise, we're just drifting and, treading dangerous waters in this vast ocean of astrology. But with meditation, we can be a clear stream for divine consciousness and not be projecting our own perceptions and ideas onto other people in charts. So I guess the real message that I want to give to you today is, inculcate a daily meditation practice yourself. Encourage that with your clients. Make them aware of their peak points of transformation so they know where to go, which is inward. Learn to water the roots, not the branches of the tree. Then you can trust that life happens and nature will take its course. And as we approach 2027, some of the things that happened in 1907, this is a profound threshold, and we are going to see a ripening of those seeds. So we may not be able to affect the world, but all is one, and if we heal ourselves, we heal a part of it. So, thank you.